Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra, and I'm excited to talk to you about speech reading, a skill that has been very helpful for me in my personal and professional life as an audiologist who is deaf. While most people call it lip reading, speech reading really is the more correct term. After all, we don't just understand what is going on based on movements of the lips. We're also looking at the teeth, the tongue, the jaw, facial expressions, body language, and gestures. However, since lip reading is more widely understood by the public, I'm going to use these two terms interchangeably. Also, here are the acronyms that I'll be using during the presentation. Let me share with you a story from my own experience. 20 years ago, when the Olympics were in Salt Lake City, Wayne Gretzky was the head of the men's hockey team, and they won a gold medal. After the game, the crowd went wild, and Wayne and Janet stood there with pleased grins on their faces. I followed a part of their conversation through speech reading. I won't tell you what they said, but I still remember it because I learned something. However, speech reading is not an easy skill to master. It requires a lot of practice, attention, and cognitive effort. It also depends on many factors, such as the speaker's clarity, visibility, and familiarity, as well as the listener's skill and background knowledge. Speech reading is not the perfect solution for communication, but it is a valuable tool that can complement other communication modalities. One of the questions that researchers have asked is whether speech reading is an innate skill that all of us have, or whether it's a learned skill that some of us acquire more than others. To answer this question, some researchers have studied how infants use speech reading to learn their native language. In one study, they used eye tracking to measure the changes in attention to the eyes and mouth of the speakers. And they found that at 4 months of age, babies focused almost solely on the eyes, regardless of the language that they were listening to. By 6 to 8 months of age, their attention shifted to the mouth, especially when they heard their native language, which was English. They continued to speech read until about 10 months of age, when they began to shift their attention back to the eyes. The researchers speculated that this second shift was due to emerging language development that reduced the need to have access to both visual and auditory cues. Possibly they went back to focusing on the eyes to get the social cues that are available from looking at the eyes. However, this pattern was not observed when the infants heard a foreign language, in this case, Spanish. Here, the infants also focused on the eyes at 4 months of age, and then they shifted their attention to the mouth by 8 months of age. But they continued to speech read as late as 12 months of age, unlike the babies who were exposed to the English video. The researchers interpreted this finding as evidence that the infants were using speech reading cues to learn Spanish, or at least to cope with the unfamiliar speech sounds. They suggested that speech reading is a natural and adaptive skill that infants use to acquire language and to deal with linguistic diversity. Speech reading is not a universal skill that everyone has to the same degree. There are individual differences in speech reading ability among children and adults, both with and without hearing loss. Scores on sentence test range from 0 to 70% correct, indicating a large variation in speech reading ability. Variation was even greater among children and adults with hearing loss than among those with normal hearing. This variation could be due to several factors, such as the age of onset of hearing loss, the degree of hearing loss, the use of amplification, the exposure to spoken language, and cognitive and linguistic skills. Research has also shown that there's a super additive effect when it comes to speech reading. If you can recognize 50% of what a talker says when listening with the eyes closed, you will be able to understand about 90% when you open your eyes. In other words, when you watch and listen, your ability to understand is greater than the sum of what you understand through watching or listening alone. To demonstrate this effect, you can try a simple exercise at home. Watch the TV news or any other program where for most of the show, the camera focuses on a single talker's face from a frontal view. Adjust the volume where you can just and only just make out what the talker is saying. Watch for about 10 seconds. Then close your eyes and see what happens. You will probably notice that when you close your eyes, your comprehension will drop. This short exercise demonstrates the power of speech reading. However, speech reading is not the perfect solution for communication. It has its limitations and challenges. One of them is the speed of conversational speech, which can be too fast for most people to be able to keep up. An additional challenge is the visibility of speech. Only 30% of the speech sounds are visible in English, and visibility is also affected by factors such as facial hair, accents, dialects, and how lip-readable a person is. So, what makes a good speech reader anyway? Jeffers and Barley in 1971 proposed a model of speech reading. In this model, there are 3 factors that contribute to speech reading ability: analytic ability, synthetic ability, and flexibility. Analytic ability is the ability to see fine detail and identify speech movements accurately and rapidly. Because only 30% of sounds in English are visible, and because conversational speech is so fast, this is not a strategy that will get you there on its own. Synthetic ability is also important. It involves using the context, intuition, and educated guessing to fill in the gaps and make sense of what you see. Flexibility is another key factor for speech reading. Flexibility plays a key role in all types of learning, including learning how to read. Flexibility involves being open-minded and adaptable. If the first thing we see or hear doesn't make sense, we need to quickly switch gears to figure out what was actually said. In adults, processing speed and visual working memory have been found to predict speech reading performance. I see over and over again in my classes how students can hold on to a visual image and then figure it out after they've had a little bit more time or they're given a bit more context. The ability to hold on to that image for a period of time is very beneficial. It probably would not surprise you to know that guessing and speech reading skill are related. And the higher level processes, including filling in and guessing strategies, contribute to speech reading accuracy. From my personal and professional experience, I know that speech reading theory can provide a helpful foundation for speech reading practice. If people with hearing loss are certain that they don't have speech reading skill, but are given some background information, they can make educated guesses. What if they knew that some sounds are impossible to speech read? And perhaps when their friends were talking to them, what they said was full of invisible sounds or full of sounds that are difficult to see, such as short vowels. Once you know through speech reading theory when it is understandable to misunderstand, you don't lose confidence. What if they knew that their speech reading skill is not fixed, but can be improved through training and practice? Everyday opportunities to practice are fraught with people turning away and covering their mouths. I think that everyone with hearing loss should have the opportunity to practice in a structured setting with the appropriate level of difficulty and to learn some background knowledge in speech reading theory. Training in speech reading theory will allow a person to make educated guesses and more skillfully use the cues that are available in the listening environment. With this foundation, it's all a matter of practice. This is why I developed a free lip reading challenge for YouTube. In an hour and a half, I aim to provide a foundation in speech reading for adults. The lip reading challenge consists of 10 lessons that are 8 to 12 minutes long. The challenge covers the most visible sounds in English. The content ranges from lip reading practice, speech reading theory, communication tips and tricks, as well as links to further reading on the topics covered. I'll link to the YouTube playlist in the section below the video frame. The playlist has links for each of the 10 lessons. Here are some of the topics that I covered. The speech movements for the most visible sounds in English, presented in homophone groups where possible. Homophones are groups of sounds that look alike on the lips. So for example, P, B, and M look alike, F and V look alike, SH, CH, and J look alike. We also talk about information on invisible sounds and other tricky aspects such as short vowels and how to tell when a vowel is long or short. We talk about the importance of context and how to ask for context. And of course, I provide lip reading practice for each of these speech sound groups. The synthetic training that I included in the challenge was around the importance of switching gears quickly and staying flexible, as well as making educated guesses. All three of these skills come into play with substitution practice. For example, P, B, and M are homophones. They look alike on the lips. In isolation, meaning when they're not in a sentence, you would not be able to tell these words apart. Meet, beat, and Pete. They all look alike. They don't sound alike, but if there's background noise covering up a word or two, it's conceivable that you would see a word and not hear it. The difference between a P and a B is only a fraction of a second of vocal cord vibration. If your attention is elsewhere for that fraction of a second, it is conceivable that you would make a mistake. So, if you think someone is saying, "It's so nice to beat you, finally," it's important to be able to switch gears in real time when you realize that the facial expression and body language that you're seeing does not match what you thought the person said. This can happen very quickly with practice. It might actually be saying, "It's so nice to meet you, finally." Let's try some more examples. In the following exercise, when you spot the error, if it's a P, that's the error, substitute a B or an M. If it's the B, that's an error, substitute a P or an M. And if it's the M, that is the error, substitute a P or a B. Here we go. I'm going to make a patch of pancakes on Saturday morning. The answer is, I'm going to make a batch of pancakes on Saturday morning. The next one is, sit on my lap. My dog might not be too happy if you sat on her. The answer is, sit on my lap. May I help you? May I help you? We heard the peas buzzing in the rose bushes. We heard the bees buzzing in the rose bushes. I went to the library to borrow a book. I went to the library to borrow a book. Supplies are transported to Mace Camp with the help of mortars. Supplies are transported to base camp with the help of porters. Hope you enjoyed that. So who would benefit from the lip reading challenge? I came up with the idea for the challenge when I met a woman who lost all of her hearing in a week due to meningitis. She has cochlear implants now, but she spent 7 months in silence while she was on the waiting list. She did not have the opportunity to gradually develop coping strategies and speech reading skills. Others who would benefit are those with fluctuating hearing loss, progressive hearing loss, or people with hearing loss who are not yet ready for hearing aids. Anyone who would benefit from a foundation in theory. It might be worthwhile for you as a professional to have a foundation in the theory if you don't already, for the benefit of the people in your caseload. The analytic aspect is all about the place of articulation. For example, children with hearing loss tend to make speech reading confusions on spelling tests. It would be helpful for the student and the teacher to know this. A foundation in theory may be especially helpful when supporting people who have less than ideal technology setups. For example, they're not wearing hearing aids or they're under-amplified with their hearing aids. For example, people who are cochlear implant candidates. And the waiting time, it can be quite long at times, depending on when in the fiscal year someone becomes a candidate. The lip reading challenge could also be a good way for others to walk in the shoes of a person with hearing loss so that they can see the challenges that are apparent when trying to read lips. The lip reading challenge could also point out some ways to take baby steps in self-advocacy, even just to watch one lesson or implement one communication strategy in the lessons. After the lip reading challenge, if people want to take it further, I offer online classes in speech reading and communication strategies. There are also online programs available. The Canadian Hard of Hearing Newfoundland chapter has a program called Read Our Lips. I'll link to it in the description section. So that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to try the super additive effect. So watch something audiovisual, TV show or a TED Talk where the content has the camera focusing on a single talker and it's a frontal view. And then adjust the volume so that it's just barely visible. Audible, barely audible. And then close your eyes and see what happens. Let me know if you try it. Here's my email address, my website, and I'm on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Bye for now.